It's been reported that global recorded music revenue in 2021 reached $28.8 billion, marking the very first time that the music industry has been able to surpass its previous high water mark of $25.2 billion all the way back in 1999. What if I told you that for the last 23 years, the music industry, quote unquote, has been shrinking, and even today continues to shrink? What if I told you that recorded music is going to zero? Let's get into it. Recently, I got into an argument with a music industry executive on Instagram who had commented on one of my posts about this topic. And it inspired me to create this video to better explain my thoughts on this and articulate them for any music industry folks out there who might want to argue with me. Now, I've done previous videos on why the music industry has always been a little itsy-witsy baby industry, so I won't retrace all of that here. But the idea that the music industry is growing is simply a charting error. For instance, if you were to chart the value of Tesla's stock over the last 5 years, you have Tesla's stock over dollars. So if Tesla's stock is worth $100 one year and $200 the next year, then that is a 100% increase, correct?
Wrong!
Not really. You also have to track the denominator. How much is a dollar worth? The US Treasury plays a large role in the value of each US dollar by either raising or cutting interest rates for US Treasuries, or by expanding or contracting the US Treasury's balance sheet, which it basically represents investments that the US Treasury has made into other things. Depending on what the US Treasury does in any given year, they will create or reduce the amount of money in the world. So there are a number of ways to account for the dollar's fluctuation in value. You can use inflation, which is a bit of a misnomer, right? It doesn't tell you exactly how much the dollar has inflated, but it does track the purchasing power of the dollar against common items like food, gasoline, housing. Or you can use the M2 money supply, which is my favorite because it actually tracks how many dollars are out there. Because of the policies of the US Treasury during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, 40% of all the dollars in circulation were created within the last 4 years, meaning that in order to match the purchasing power of a dollar before the COVID-19 pandemic, you would have to have $1.66. So if we adjust the growth of the global recorded music industry from 1999 to today, and we account for the M2 money supply, you will find that the music industry has not only not kept up with inflation or the growth of the money supply, it's actually lost against the growth of the money supply. That means that during the most insane everything bubble to come along in ever, the music industry failed to even beat inflation. It means that you weren't even floating on the sea of money. You actually sank. You're drowning. You could have thrown a dart at a wall of assets that you could invest in over the last 5 years and have come out pretty well no matter what you hit. But if you had invested in the music industry, you would have lost money. Now, we talked about how between the beginning of COVID and the end of 2021, we saw just a blow off top of every single financial asset that you could possibly invest in, right? In a time where everyone has all the money to get what they need, oil, food, a car, housing, whatever. Once all those needs are met, where do you put your money? Hopefully somewhere it will grow, right? By buying an asset like a stock or a crypto or more houses or artwork or private equity, stock that's not on the stock exchange. But when you run out of all those things, where does your money go? It starts going really, really weird places. It's more shady investments, emerging markets, and yes, intellectual property. Music catalogs. They thought, I'll just buy all of Bob Dylan's records. So essentially, the financial asset investors of the world ran out of pet rocks to buy, and they just started buying music catalogs. And that was fine because we were in the middle of an insane mania phase in which the value of everything was just going up massively. But then in 2021, sort of the music stopped, so to speak. Fed Chair Jerome Powell basically pivoted. Okay, we recognize that inflation is not transitory, that it's not going to go away. It is a huge problem, and it's starting to get really massive to where we almost had double-digit inflation. The Fed decided to start raising interest rates on US Treasuries, which has the effect of contracting, sucking in the money supply, making it harder to borrow, making making it harder to spend, making it tighter financially, globally. And thus began the everything bubble pop. Cryptocurrency down 90%. Stocks like Netflix performing a lot like cryptocurrencies and falling 60% in a day. Firms going bust. Investment funds, hedge funds, even pension funds going bust. People going to jail, companies shuttering. This has been what 2022 is all about.
I want you to hit me, Frank. I want you to hit me. Let go, you're scaring me.
So what are the effects of this bust? Well, funny enough, pretty much every major investment fund that sprang up between 2020 and 2022 in order to purchase the catalogs of legacy artists, snap up IP, buy it all, they're all writing down their investments. It was reported that somewhere between $200 and $500 million was paid for Bob Dylan's catalog. The problem with that is that Bob Dylan's catalog generates about $16 million per year. And if the music industry's global revenues are any indication, that's going to continue to shrink against the purchasing power of the dollar. But if Sony paid $500 million for Bob Dylan's catalog, it would take them 31.25 years to recoup the investment that they made into Bob Dylan's catalog. So unless Bob Dylan's catalog grows significantly in the revenue that it's generating, which as we've already said in this video is not likely, Sony just made like the worst investment you could they'd be better off buying US Treasury bonds, getting 6% compounding than buying Bob Dylan's catalog, for which they're getting 3.2% returns, and it's not compounding. That's 3.2% of the original investment. That's not great. That's so much worse than 5% compounding across 31.25 years. There are a lot of companies out there where the model was to create some kind of technology or an app and then just accumulate users, take investment from venture capitalists and use that investment to run at a negative, no profit whatsoever, just losing money all the time. It doesn't matter, as long as we get all the users, then eventually we can make a profit. And one of the companies it's worth mentioning that falls into this category of pre-profit is Spotify. For all of the talk about how Spotify and other streaming services are saving the music industry single-handedly, Spotify is not a profitable company. They really never have been. And what's their main problem? Their main problem is that they cannot turn a profit because of the government-mandated payouts to intellectual property holders. They have to actually pay the artists who are responsible for the music that's being streamed, and they have trouble turning a profit while doing so. It's quite possible that a subscription-based streaming service at the price that Spotify charges is just not possible. It may be the case that, you know, at whatever it is, $9.99 a month, that you just can't make money as a streaming service with the constraints to that system. So either Spotify has to jack up the price and experiment with, will people pay this higher price, or it has to live a life of constant risk. It has to constantly take in investment from outside investors, sell off more of its equity, dilute the equity of those who already bought in order to keep the Ponzi scheme running. But make no mistake, it's a Ponzi scheme. It does not have any way to generate profit for its investors unless it gets more investors. That's what a Ponzi scheme is. And this is just an intellectual property problem. If you can digitize the productive output of an idea, you cannot prevent it from going to zero. It will eventually lose all monetary capability. Now, there are ways to fight that off for a number of decades. For instance, you can make it more convenient to pay for the music than it is to steal, which is effectively what Spotify has done. They've made it more convenient to pay for your streaming than to just steal the music. So the only thing they're doing is just sort of staving off the death knell of a troubled idea. The idea that ideas themselves are property. It's not a good one. We've held it up using government force. We gave the government the power to enforce ideas as property. If you can just prove to us that your idea is yours, we'll give you property rights around it, just like your car or your computer. You own it. But it's not like property because it can be reproduced infinitely at no cost. When someone else is using it, it doesn't mean you can't use it, and there's no degradation when you reproduce it. It's an exact copy. These characteristics of intellectual property that don't belong to regular property make it impossible to treat intellectual property like regular property. It's not like regular property. We only just made it sort of like that from an economic and a jurisprudence perspective with government force, with guns and laws and courts. But it's not like regular property, and it's gonna go to zero. It's going to zero. Unless there is one escape hatch here. There is one way you could possibly rescue the idea of intellectual property and make it actually feasible. And that's Web 3. I don't want to give you a bunch of buzzwords and be like, oh, Web 3. But like, you know, blockchains have the function. They functionally make digital files have some of the characteristics of regular property. As long as we all agree to the rules of a blockchain, a data structure, a record on that blockchain is a lot like regular property. That's why NFTs are so exciting. They give property rights to digital files, and all ideas can be made into digital files, and thereby you can give property rights to ideas. You can give property characteristics to ideas. That's exciting. It will take large-scale adoption that is incredibly convenient for creators in the way it pans out for it to become sort of the escape hatch to this IP going to zero idea that I've just proposed to you. But you know, maybe if consumers are willing to pay the appropriate fees to unlock digital property on blockchains, then maybe we'll save it. The reason that I'm so sort of flippant about this idea of IP going to zero is because IP doesn't benefit my friends, creators, artists. It doesn't benefit us. It's only ever benefited people who aren't us, who seek to exploit us. Having the government force ideas to be like property has only ever benefited conglomerate record labels of the world and the publishers of the world who exploit and extract money. Black Sheep just sued for, their record label withholding $750 million in royalties. So a modern era record label, despite all the advancements we've made in fairness since the 1950s, was able to withhold $750 million from an artist just as like a fuck you, I'm gonna keep the money. These people are not your friends, and you shouldn't feel any type of way if their bags go to zero, because they're not your bags.
This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby.
Now up here I'll put a video where I talk about why recorded music and the sale of it is not the artist's savior. The savior of artists is the fact that we get more attention than any other industry in the world that gets so little money. So we're probably the worst in the world at converting attention into dollars. Influencers do this really well, and the companies that pay for influencer marketing also do it really well. They take the attention of the influencer and they use it to sell a product. We don't do it really well. We continue to insist that all of our money come from intellectual property enforcement, which is a bad idea to begin with. It always has been bad. It's been bad for hundreds of years. And as soon as the computer and networked computing and the internet
surfing, that sounds pretty cool already.
Andrew, don't interrupt.
And personal computing and home computing and computers more powerful than any that existed in 1980, being this size and in your pocket, when that happened, it meant that intellectual property was doomed, unless Web 3 changes that. But it doesn't look good. If you take the $28.8 billion that the music industry generated in 2021 and you adjust it for inflation to $1999, you would get $16.83 billion. Last year, the music industry didn't set a new record. The music industry is down about 40% in terms of revenue. You're used to hearing, oh, streaming is saving the music industry. Everything's changing. We're back, baby. We're so not back, dude. So I hope this fully illustrates why I think that pretty much every music industry executive is wrong, not correct, inaccurate, missing a few things, and why I think that despite record valuations of legacy artist catalogs being thrown around in the height of the most insane financial asset mania that has ever happened, in spite of all that, I still think the music industry has been and continues to contract. It's going down. And if it just keeps going down at this rate, it's gonna go to zero. So I've been Circa for Indepreneur. We teach artists how to monetize without worrying so much about intellectual property, which is going to zero. And we didn't even talk about AI, maybe in a future video. And if you wanna get better at converting the attention that music can garner into dollars, check us out. Go sign up for our Indie Pro membership. And if you like this video, like and subscribe, and I'll have more videos like this or other stuff real soon. That's about it. Peace.